What's happening, YouTube? This is AP Sports Cards here with another video for you. Today we're going to be talking about rarity and what makes cards rare and buying cards that are actually rare for a reason. So, yeah, we're going to hop right into this. I think, there's a lot of confusion around cards and why we like cards, right? And I think that the rarity aspect of cards, the fact that they are limited, is what provides them with value. And it's really the only thing that provides them with value. Some people might say that there's value in the art, and I think that that's maybe true, but you can get the art without getting the card, right? I can print off the art, I could counterfeit a card, and I would have the art. And people can do that. I know, it's illegal, but like you can get reprints of these cards. It's obviously not the same if you have a reprint. So there's something about the fact that this is licensed memorabilia and that it's limited that we are attracted to as a hobby. So, what are the ways that a card can be rare? How can the production of a card be limited, and for what reasons is it limited? I think I'm going to get into four reasons today, four different types of rarity that we have with cards, and we'll talk about each of them and the pros and cons of each type of rarity. Starting off, we're going to talk about organic rarity, and I think this is probably my favorite form of rarity. Organic rarity is when a card is not a lot, it wasn't ever really intended to be rare, and it wasn't rare on purpose, but not a lot of them exist. So that could happen for, several reasons. That could happen because maybe the card was printed during a time when demand was low, and then demand exploded after the card was printed, and now that card is limited because all of these card companies, forget what they tell you, they're all attempting to print to demand. They're printing as many cards as they can that they think will sell, and if demand is low, they will print fewer cards, and then once demand rises again, the cards that were printed during that time are more valuable and are more rare. It makes perfect sense. The other reason why you could have organic rarity is because of attrition. A lot of these cards could have been printed, but over time, those cards were just kind of lost. They're either in people's collections or they were destroyed or ruined or damaged, and those cards are really off the market now. So yeah, I think that this form of rarity is probably the most valuable in my opinion. I think it's like the type of rarity that I'm attracted to the most. If you think about the type of cards where that fall into this category, you're talking about like say the Mickey Mantle card, right? I don't think that Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps was intended to be a short print card, right? And I don't think the Hannes Wagner from T206 was supposed to be short printed either, right? What's cool about the organic rarity is it also comes with some story. So the demand side is kind of tricky to gauge. The supply side is almost easier because you can tell kind of roughly based on pop counts and expected print runs how many cards you think exist for a given card. But on the demand side, or sorry, yeah, on the demand side, it's trickier. And I think one of the things that's cool about organic rarity is sometimes the supply, the fact that the card used to be available and is now rare, makes the demand more intense. And sometimes there's a story that goes along with it that really helps prop up the demand. And then on top of that, you also have short supply, so these can become some of the most valuable cards in the hobby. Let me explain, right? So like the Mickey Mantle 1952 Topps card, it's a rare card. It's hard to find, and it's hard to find for a reason, right? It wasn't that Topps decided that this card was going to be a chase card. It was that supposedly a bunch of these things ended up in a freaking lake. Like I don't know the details of the story, but that's kind of the lore behind it, which I think is cool. I think that's a cool story. Hannes Wagner, supposedly his card is printed less than the rest of the players in that set because he didn't like the idea of his name being used to sell tobacco. And if you're if you're telling that story to somebody about why this card is rare, it matters, as opposed to a different type of rarity where you might say this card is rare because Panini decided it was going to be rare. So yeah, big fan of the organic rarity. I think that's kind of the number one rarity type that I'm interested in collecting. But these are also some of the most expensive cards in the hobby. Thinking on the Pokemon side, right? We're talking about how cards that were once plentiful but are now rare can have a lot of demand. That's how I think about like base set first edition Pokemon, right? I think that the there are rarer cards in Pokemon than base set first edition Charizard. There are trophy cards that were, only a few were printed. There's all kinds of promo cards that are much rarer, but that card was so available at one time that we all got attached to it in our childhood, and now it's not available. So we have kind of an increased demand for it, and now that the supply has shrunk over the 20 years that the product has been released, it becomes a very expensive card, and I think that's cool. So the second type of rarity I want to talk about is what I'll call manufactured rarity. A lot of people think about this, right? This is the card is rare because the company that printed it decided it was going to be rare. This is a chase card. It was a parallel. It was either numbered or not numbered. It has a different color. That's the type of cards we're talking about here. Um, I think that those cards are interesting, right? I'm not a big fan of manufactured rarity or manufactured scarcity. However, the market seems to like it. I think that some of the most valuable cards in the hobby that have sold have had at least elements of manufactured rarity, and so we can't just discount it, right? I think if we're trying to determine what other people will like, um, we need to talk about manufactured rarity as a positive, not just a negative. Now, if we're trying to determine what I like, I'm not a huge fan, so I try to stay away from that. And the other reason I'm staying away from manufactured rarity these days is because there's so much of it. There's so much manufactured rarity that it's kind of falsely rare, right? I think that I like to evaluate cards based off of, I start with the player if it's a sport, and I think what ranking of card this is. And so if you're talking about, a tricolor prism, I'll bag on the card that's behind me. I have a tricolor prism Jason Tatum from Select up there, and and that card is rare because they decided it was going to be rare, and I think that that's a cool card. But I think that the fact that it has three colors doesn't make it one of the top Jason Tatum cards in existence, and in fact there are many other parallels in that same set that are worth more. So yeah, manufactured rarity is a valuable thing in the market today. I think that the the value placed on manufactured rarity is declining in favor of some other forms of rarity. All right, third, I'm going to talk about practical rarity. Practical rarity is like a term that I just invented, and really what it means is that this card is rare because it's actually difficult to produce. So when I'm thinking about that, I'm mostly thinking about like patches and autos. Um, I think that that is still a rare card because the company decided it was rare, but it's also rare because you can only get a player to sign so many autographs, and you can only get so many patches from a player's jerseys. So, and there are degrees to this, right? A sticker auto has less practical rarity than an on card auto, and a napkin patch has less practical rarity than a game used patch from a certain game. But I'm a huge fan of practical rarity. I think that um, these card companies can continue printing manufactured rarity infinitely. They will never run out of colors because they've started to do combinations of colors, right? And you'll never ever run out of combinations of colors. You can do four colored things, and there's a red, green, blue, white, and then there's a red, green, blue, orange, right? And you'll never run out. You can have infinite numbers of combinations of colors. What you can't have is infinite autographs. There is eventually a cap. I know these players are signing a ton, but at least there's something limiting um, the company's ability to continue producing an infinite amount of these cards. So I really enjoy the practical rarity. I enjoy the autos and the patches. Other things that might fall into the category of practical rarity are, I would say, I don't know anything about this market, but from what I understand, PMGs stand for precious metal gems, and they have actual precious metals in them. And I think that probably falls under the category of making the card more difficult to source and manufacture. So I would say PMGs follow this. I would almost even say that first edition cards follow this. Um, you can't make a second run of a first edition card, so there is a practical cap on how many of these can exist. And it's not just rare for no reason, it's rare because it was first. So a big fan of practical rarity. There's a lot of different cards that come up as examples for both practical rarity and manufactured rarity. The one that comes to mind for me, and this shows you that these types of rarity, besides there are types of rarity besides organic rarity that are really valued in the hobby. So if you look at the Luca Logoman patch auto, right? It has some aspects of both of this, right? It has the practical rarity that comes with the auto and a very important patch. Although I'm not certain if that patch was player game used. It was probably player worn. I don't really know, but the that is a great patch and it's a great auto, um, or it's at least an auto, and then there's a limited number of those. So I think that shows some practical rarity to that card. But there are other Luka Doncic patch autos, and he's worn other jerseys, so you could get other Logo Man patches. So I would say that there's another aspect of that where they just decided they were only going to make one of those. That is a one of one card, and so that there, I would say numbering that card added manufactured rarity to that card, manufactured scarcity. Um, and so that combination of practical rarity and manufactured rarity resulted in a card that sold for over $5 million. So we can't discount all of these other types of rarity. Um, I think that these are important things to keep in mind. Finally, I'm going to talk about condition rarity. Condition rarity, I think, is actually another important form of rarity. So when I think of condition rarity, I think of like a base set Charizard, Ken Griffey Jr., cards that are plentiful but are very hard to find in great condition. Um, I do believe that this type of rarity matters too. I think that actually this type of rarity can be really valuable, right? Because people have fond memories of the card and they want a version of that card that's worth money. They want a version of that card that's valuable. This is kind of how I feel about some of these Ken Griffey Jr. cards that I want. I'm a big Mariners collector, and I haven't really dug into buying a lot of Griffey yet because I think that most of the card market is overpriced. But um, I I think I could buy a $6 uh, tops traded rookie of Ken Griffey Jr. And I actually have. I have one. I still have a desire to have a PSA 10. And this is kind of an embarrassing thing to admit, but I'm not sure if I have a desire for a PSA 10 because I want a card in that condition, or if I have a desire for a PSA 10 because I want a card that was important to me that's also valuable. And so honestly, kind of the value begets value here. And the fact that the card is valuable makes it more valuable to me, which is kind of a bizarre way to look at things. But I think that's true in a lot of cases for these condition rarity cards, right? I think that's true for Charizard and Ken Griffey and all most junk wax, right? It was very difficult to get it in good condition. And so I think that having it in good condition actually is rare and actually is valuable. I feel that way of a lot of Pokemon cards. If you look at pop counts and price ratios between PSA 9 Pokemon cards and PSA 10 Pokemon cards, the 10s are often like 8 to 10 times the price of the 9s, and that's because they're actually hard to find. So yeah, I think that condition rarity is important too. So there's a fifth type of rarity that I'm not really going to talk about here because I don't think that it adds any value whatsoever, but I think suckers might pay for this type of rarity. And I'll call that pop count rarity. It's sort of a subset of condition rarity where the card is actually available in good condition, but not many have been graded a PSA 10. And so it looks as if this card has condition rarity because there are very few PSA 10 copies, when in actuality, it just has pop count rarity, which is meaningless. It's just people haven't decided to grade this card enough. I think about this for a lot of ultra modern cards that aren't quite high enough in value yet to justify grading. So there you have it. There are kind of the four types of rarity that come with sports cards, Pokemon cards, and whatever. So I always try to draw some conclusions for this, and I think my conclusions are that I think that organic rarity and practical rarity are undervalued compared to manufactured rarity today. I think that I would be trying to get out of cards that have a lot of manufactured rarity because manufactured rarity is infinite. You can continue to create cards that are manufactured rare. You can continue to create parallels. You can continue to number cards as many as you want. Pretty soon we'll have cards numbered to 103 and then another card numbered to 107. It's just crazy and it's not real rarity. I think that I would much rather be in a card that's organically rare, where the card was intended to be printed to demand, but it just there aren't very many available. And so what that looks like, right, is maybe a card from post junk wax but pre ultra modern. That was kind of a low demand period. Of course, there are other periods where you can get actual vintage cards are kind of expensive, but they all often have this form of organic rarity. But I think that, for a more affordable option, if you slide in that area between junk wax and ultra modern, or you can really um, find those organically rare cards. On top of that, I really want to value practical rarity. I think patches and autos are important, and I think that they're they're important because they limit the amount of games that these tops and Panini can play. I was listening. This was a long time ago, many months ago. I think it was probably a sports cards nonsense podcast, maybe, or maybe Card Talk, one of those two. And they had on a guy from Panini, and he said, they would try to print more. He really said this. He said they would try to print more cards if they could, but they're limited by the numbers of autos that they can get from these players, and the players will only sign so much. And so, what was their solution to that? Um, used to be you'd have like one auto per box. Now it's one hit per box, and that hit may be an auto or some special type of manufactured patch or refractor. And so they were able to continue to print more. But what that told me two things. That told me that God, they're just going to keep going with this manufactured rarity. It's going to get ridiculous, for one, and for two, it told me that they are limiting. They are limited by the amount of autos that a player is willing to sign. There is a practical limit to where the player just won't sign anymore. And that's exciting to me because at least that caps it somewhere. I know that autos aren't, might become a dime a dozen if these card companies keep getting these guys to sign and sign and sign, but at least there's something there to limit them besides just their own imagination. So, if I'm thinking about that, right, that I would love to get a card that's, from 2009 that has a, a a good auto or a good patch, an on card auto or a game used patch. Those are the type of cards that I'm really searching for right now. Those cards are kind of expensive, but they're not expensive compared to the crazy manufactured parallel rarity that we're seeing in like 2020 cards. So, I have a card that I've had on my list for forever, and you don't have to accuse me of pump and dumping here because I don't own this card yet, so I'm going to compete with all of you to buy it. Is like, say, a Mookie Betts first Bowman auto, right? He's sliding in that time when cards weren't that popular, so it wasn't printed quite that much, even naturally. And then on top of that, it's got some practical rarity from the on-card auto. I would love to get that card, and maybe even get that card in a high grade because I do still think condition rarity matters too. Um, you know, I know there's a kind of a backlash towards grading in some circles these days, and then there's some people who are grade everything. I think that there's obviously a time and place to grade cards, and that time and place is cards that are actually hard to get in good condition should be graded so that you can prove that they're in good condition. So if I want to get a Mookie Betts first Bowman auto and a BGS 9.5, I think that that's a great buy and has potential to increase in the future. I think that obviously vintage has tons of potential, and if you can get vintage along with condition rarities, those are some of the most expensive cards in the hobby. Manufactured rarity holds value today, but I think that value is on its way down in favor of mostly organic rarity and practical rarity. I think condition rarity is kind of properly valued right now. I think that if you look at the cards that have high multipliers between PSA 9 and PSA 10, those are the cards that have very significant pop count differences between PSA 9 and PSA 10. So that tells me that for those cards, condition rarity is pretty properly valued. The place where I'm not sure if condition rarity is valued properly is on cards that are similar pop counts between the 10s and the 9s. And I think in that case, condition rarity is maybe a little overvalued. So I think there are areas where condition rarity can help, and I think that organic rarity and practical rarity are always a good place to be. And I'm personally going to try to stay away from manufactured rarity. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something today. I'm interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are in the comments about these different types of rarity, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks.